why are you running for State Board of Educations, and what qualifications do you think you bring to the position?
Well, last summer, when our current board proposed the health standards that included the radical sexual indoctrination, I realized that we needed voices on the board that better reflected the values of Western Nebraska, so I decided to run. Now, I am an educator, and I have taught in all three areas that the board sets regulations over. I've taught in public school, private school, and homeschool, and I hold a current State of Nebraska teaching certificate in English, grades 7 through 12, and I have a Master's of Education with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction.
And so where do you stand on the postponed health standard, education standards that have been indefinitely postponed?
So I am concerned about the terminology used, indefinitely postponed. When this board was given the option to permanently reject these standards, everyone but Kirk Penner voted against rejecting them. And then a few weeks after that, the NDE released a press release that stated that they had an ad hoc committee that had made recommendations to their executive committee that they draft a policy that would state that they would be writing standards in all curriculum areas and content areas. So that would include health. And so it seems like a backdoor way to bring those health standards in.
And if elected, what would you like to see done with these standards?
I believe that health is best taught at the local level where it has been. Now we have health frameworks that are available on the NDE website for all districts to use, but health and these sex ed standards need to stay at the community level where those things are taught to the values of each community.
And what do you feel is age-appropriate health education standards? If elected, how would you implement them?
Okay, well, there's a difference between health standards and comprehensive sex ed. Comprehensive sex ed brings sex ed K through 12. Health standards, brushing your teeth, learning how to eat, make good food choices, those things should be taught K-12. The sex ed needs to be kept at the community level where those values can be taught at those community values.
And what efforts would you like to take to protect students from materials that are not sexually appropriate?
Okay, we have a loophole right now in education and in libraries, and it allows for materials that would normally be considered pornographic to be used in an educational setting, which would include schools and libraries. And we need to close that loophole up. If something is considered pornographic outside of the school, it should be considered pornographic inside the school, and that needs to stop. We need to protect our children's hearts and minds from that type of material.
And as the debate over the proposed health education standards showed, many parents and communities felt that the State Board of Education wasn't listening to their concerns. So if elected, how would you work to make sure they're heard?
Okay. Well, that is one thing that I've already been doing in my campaign. Since I announced on August 2nd, I have been traveling District 7. I have driven over 19,000 miles and been to 105 different locations listening to the concerns of parents, grandparents, voters, community members, and school staff as well. And so I would continue to do that as the next District 7 member, is to listen and be out in the district.
And how would you define critical race theory? And in your opinion, is it being taught in Nebraska public schools?
Okay, that's a big one.
So I guess how would you define critical race theory?
Sure. Okay. So critical race theory stems from a Marxist belief that we have always victims and oppressors. And critical race theory then turns it into the belief that one race is always oppressing the other race. Is that being taught in Nebraska schools? I have with me a course syllabus that shows that there is a school in District 7 who is using a book by the Marxist writer Howard Zinn. I also have printouts from the NDE website that show resources that they offer to teachers in schools, things like teaching social justice. The issue is that when the school district that has the Howard Zinn book was questioned by a parent, they referred back to the NDE and said the NDE has this available on the website. And so it really stems back to the NDE being responsible for the proliferation of these materials.
And do you support banning certain books in school?
I know you gave me these, but it just takes a minute.
No worries, no worries.
You've got some heavy questions here. I think that certain books are less age appropriate than other books. Now, as a former English teacher, I've seen a movement to ban books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Lord of the Flies, and that concerns me. But I've also seen an influx of books that most people across the state of Nebraska would consider to be pornographic. And we need to be very careful about what books are allowed in, because these pornographic books are very damaging to children's hearts and minds.
And so what sort of material do you think should be banned?
I think that anything that we as a culture would consider pornography should not be allowed in schools.
And what should be the proper channel for banning questionable books?
Okay, that needs to start at the local level. And most school districts do have a process in place for questioning books. And so parents need to use that chain of command and follow that process.
Perfect. And make sure everything's still good.
All right.
And so what specific plans do you have to recruit and retain teachers here in Nebraska?
One of the advantages I have of having driven around and talked to so many different people throughout District 7 is I've heard some of the issues that we have with teacher recruitment. There are some quick solutions at our fingertips through the NDE and the certification process. For example, a teacher who is currently certified in Nebraska but wants to extend their certificate often has to, by the rules of our certification process, student teach again. So that's a loophole that can be closed up. Teachers who come in from out of state, we do not offer reciprocity for out of state teaching certificates. And so those teachers are then required to take additional classes to come here and teach. And we lose the opportunity to recruit those teachers.
And how would you address the issue of teacher burnout among teachers who, if you're elected to the Board of Education?
Mm-hmm. Well, teacher burnout, I think, is a smoldering problem that we've now seen COVID fan the flames of. It has so many different causes. It's related to COVID. It's also related to discipline issues in the classroom, a lot of unfunded mandates that keep being put down on teachers from the top, from the state level, and nothing's being taken off the teacher's plate. So there's a lot of facets that need to be addressed, and from what I've heard, I do believe that the state board has the power to address some of these to some extent and work with local school districts on some of the others.
And so speaking of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's put a strain on Nebraska students in terms of learning loss and mental strains. So what specific things would you do as Board of Education member to address this issue specifically?
Can I just pause for a minute? What? Probably 10 minutes, okay? I'm sorry.
No, you're kidding.
I'm trying really hard.
So I guess how would you address
the learning? Okay, sure. So unfortunately, when our current board was given $84 million to address the learning loss, they did not have an overarching plan. They just started spending the money. And so I think what we need to do is we need to talk to people who are actually out in the field to find out what are the areas of learning loss and what do they see as the best way to address it. Is this extended school days? Is it extended school years? Do we need to do private tutoring, summer education to catch students up? But really our experts are the teachers. And so rather than just coming out with a plan, I'd like to visit with them more extensively and find out what they recommend.
And what do you feel the balance should be between the State Board of Education and local school boards? Do there need to be more control between one or the other?
Okay. Well, local school districts and local school boards really reflect what the community needs and wants, and they understand best the educational needs of their students. And so they need to retain the most decision making and control over their local schools and what is being taught. And so the state board needs to have less control, to back off a little bit more, and give more of that autonomy and the duties that can be better done efficiently and effectively at the local level. Then we need to give those back to the local districts.
And when you look at test scores, you know, some school districts and schools have students that are not performing at the level as they should. You know, if elected, what would you do to ensure that students meet those proficiency standards?
Well, we have two different types of testing in the state of Nebraska. Some are proficiency and some are progress testing. And unfortunately, a proficiency test doesn't show how much a student has learned. And so progress testing is just as valuable to understanding the metrics of where a student begins at the start of the school year and where they end. And so we need to have both of those in place. The proficiency really helps us grasp what the district as a whole is doing and what measures of improvement they need to have. But we do need to make sure that we're implementing progress testing in all of our districts so that students can begin to measure their learning progression.
And so what actions do you feel...
Can you please stop turning? I know that's super fun, Ben, but it makes a noise and the camera picks it up. Thanks.
A couple more questions, guys. So what actions do we feel need to be taken for schools and districts whose students are continually not seeing proficiency at the test standards?
So we do need to. There is a school district in District 7 that had not been audited in 22 years. And this school district did have students only 28% scoring proficient in math. And so what needed to be done many years ago with this district was to audit their accreditation and then come up with a workable improvement plan and hold that district accountable with more checks and more visits from the NDE to make sure that the school is actually making progress toward that improvement.
And if elected, how would you work to expand early childhood opportunities for students, specifically in rural schools?
Okay. I know. Okay, guys, now I asked you to be on the rug, so I'm going to ask you to go back. She said there's like 3 more questions. Get on the rug. Thank you. Okay, now we have to recenter everything. Do you have to refocus me and light?
Yeah,
okay.
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 Okay, so if
All right.
elected, how would you work to expand early childhood opportunities for students in rural schools?
Okay. We do have a serious need for pre-K and early childhood care in our rural areas. However, I don't know that every time that there's a need that the best solution is a government-run solution. Having talked to an early child care provider in COZAD, she told me that one of the big factors in not being able to keep the centers open and keep things running is just the low wages that these early child care providers get. Many of them are only being paid minimum wage, and they can earn more even at a fast food restaurant. So I think that before the government jumps in with more solution, we need to really look at what is causing the problem and address that as a society before we look to the government to solve the problem.
And how would you, as State Board of Education member, work to ensure all Nebraska students are college and career ready once they graduate high school?
One program that really excites me is the Career Pathways program. This pulls in business and industry into your local school district, where they give the students an idea of what the needs will be in that particular field and then how to pursue an occupation in that field, and create also some internships with our local businesses and industries where students can begin to intern at the high school level. What that will do, if we can encourage the growth of this, is going to help all of our students understand that not everyone needs to have a 4-year college degree, that you can earn a good living with a trade degree, maybe learn how to weld or HVAC systems, and provide needed services to our rural communities so you can come back here to our rural areas, raise a family on a good income in our good rural communities. That's going to help keep our rural communities going. It's also going to help our school systems.
And would you like to see the State Board of Education expand dual credit course opportunities?
One situation with that is out here in the rural areas, it's very difficult to have dual credit. And so not all students have that opportunity. And so I do think that we need to look at the schools that want to bring it in and find creative ways to make that happen for them.
And if elected, how would you work to create workforce partnerships for kids who may not want to attend college?
Okay. Did I kind of already answer that with the career pathways, or you want me to answer it again?
Yeah, I mean, I have to ask it since I asked all of them.
Okay, okay. So I think that what we could do is we could really expand and encourage the Career Pathways program, which allows students to intern as high school students with our local businesses and industries and helps them get a vision of what life could look like, what kind of jobs they can have, and how they could remain in the rural communities post-graduation.
And what would you do to encourage Nebraska high school students to return to their hometowns to work and raise a family, specifically in rural Nebraska?
Okay, I'm trying to think how I can answer this differently since it's very similar to the other ones. So one issue that I've noticed as a parent and a lifelong resident of a rural town is that our students often don't have a complete grasp of what are the occupations that I could do. And so I think we need to encourage our local school districts to help students see beyond the occupations of teacher, doctor, nurse, policeman, to see that there are many occupations in our local school districts, and schools can do that through various job fairs, presentations, to really expand students' understanding and vision of what rural life looks like and what it takes to keep a community going.
My last question is, why should people vote for you?
Okay. Hey guys, I'm on the last question. So sit up, we're almost done. Okay. So one thing that I bring is the voice of a mom. I have 5 children and sorry.
Oh, your pain.
These are the last 2. Okay. So I bring the voice of a mom. I bring a perspective of someone whose children are directly impacted by every decision that the state board makes. I also have a husband who works for North Platte Public Schools and is the IT director. So our family is invested and impacted by public education. People should vote for me because I'm a true conservative. I'm a voice of Western Nebraska, having lived here my entire life. And I bring the Western Nebraska values and common sense along with my educational background to really represent the voters of Western Nebraska and not special interest groups.